Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Suda with Nuna. I think one of the best thing I did while living with my parents was allowing myself to have patience. And it's funny because I've always prayed about how I want to be more patient and how I want to be stronger when it comes to patience because I noticed that I lack that a lot. God gave me my parents. Me living with my parents again, it was such a interesting dynamic because I left when I was 18 and I came back when I was 23. And a lot has changed since then. I learned to live on my own and I had my own unique style and my parents had theirs, and me living under their roof again, it was really interesting. One of the biggest things that I struggled with at first was having patience for them. Having patience for your parents is a lesson I had to learn on my own because one, I asked God to help me build patience, and two, I noticed that I was just lacking patience in general. And number three, my parents were like the best people to actually grow my patience for. I had to really be patient with my parents when they switched their phones from a Samsung to an iPhone. I actually asked them, I've been nudging them for many, many years that they should switch to an iPhone. And they were like, yeah, but we're so comfortable with the Samsung and I heard it's a bigger switch and I don't want to switch. Like they were just so adamant about not wanting to switch. So I didn't want to force it anymore. But since I was living with them again, I was persuading them because they would come to me when their phone has problems and I literally don't know how to work a Samsung anymore. I've had a Samsung phone up until I was in my senior year of high school. That's when I switched to an iPhone. And ever since then, I've been Team Apple. I genuinely don't know how to help them. So I had to look on YouTube for their solutions and stuff like that. And I was just basically telling them that there's so many perks and so many benefits of having an iPhone than a Samsung because my brothers and I, we all use Apple devices. We don't know how to help you if you have Samsung problems or if you have phone problems. I genuinely don't know how to help you. So there's so many benefits you share when we all have an iPhone. We can share iCloud, we can do group FaceTime calls and do iMessage and etc. etc. So I basically gave them all the benefits and they were willing to switch. So they did. It was a big, big adjustment for my parents because they've always just had a Samsung phone and they don't know how to work an iPhone. And if you've made the switch before, you probably understand what I'm talking about because the iPhone doesn't have a back button, but the Samsung does. And the Samsung phone that my mom used to have a pen because she used a Samsung Note. She was asking me like, why don't they have all of this and blah blah blah. Like, in a way, she was kind of complaining because she wasn't really wanting to switch, but we just kept telling her to switch, so she did. But my mom was really not having it. Them switching over to the iPhone was when I really learned to be patient with them because these things are already new, right? Like I know how to work my iPhone, but I never really had to teach someone how to use their iPhone. So God gave me the opportunity to grow my patience through then. And I'm very grateful because now they are able to share with their friends or their family friends about iPhone. And I call my dad the iPhone missionary because he's been sharing about how good iPhones are. And if his friends don't have iPhones, he's always like, you should switch to an iPhone. Like iPhones are great and camera quality is amazing and stuff like that. So it's really cool to see how at first it was really hard, but now my parents are actually really enjoying having an iPhone because we get to airdrop photos and group FaceTime calls, and we don't use Kakao Talk anymore. Kakao Talk is actually a Korean WhatsApp. We don't use that anymore. We are on iMessage. That's one of the best things about switching because my brothers and I, we always had an iMessage group chat, but my parents, they didn't have an iPhone, so we couldn't. But I'm very grateful that they were able to switch. And at first, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. I don't want to go back to that time. We're just enjoying the fruits of our labor. My parents took time to really understand how an iPhone works. And my mom even has an iPad now and she's loving it. They love how everything syncs together. So, and that's also one of my favorite things about Apple. But, anyways, back to being patient. Being patient with your parents was another skill that I learned living with my parents. I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity because if I didn't, I feel like I would have been so frustrated if I didn't live with my parents. I don't think I would have really built that skill, especially with my parents, because the older they get, the slower they're going to get. And especially with how fast everything has been evolving, especially with AI and everything like that, it's really important that I help my parents fit in and that they're not left out. Something I noticed when I was living in Guam was how a lot of people don't really know the new like digital advancements because they don't live with their kids. A lot of their kids are in the mainland or they're in Korea, so they don't know what's new and they don't really know how to do new things. So for example, when my parents and we went to Japan, I installed all the Suica cards on our phones, and it was really nice because Samsung phones, I think by then they weren't working or something like that. So it was really nice, and they were able to tell their friends about like, oh yeah, like Esther did the Suica cards. So it was really easy for us because when their friends went to Japan, they had to like wait in line and get the physical cards and everything like that. It was a very different experience from what my parents had and from what their friends had. So I'm just very grateful that I get to help them with that. And one thing I really am very, very grateful for is how my parents were willing to learn, because I've talked to some adults, and some adults in my life are very stubborn and they don't like new things because they're just so used to whatever they had and they don't want to learn something new. They just assume that new is hard and that something new is going to be difficult when the something new might be more beneficial to you and it might be more efficient. But they have a hard time seeing that. But my parents, especially my dad was so open to learning new things, and I'm very grateful because my dad was also able to help my mom, because my mom isn't as open to learning new things. She likes traditional ways and she likes having things her own way, but my dad was able to encourage her, and so was I. So I'm very grateful that my parents were very open-minded to learning new things. I'm sure that your parents might be different, because I've seen people in my life who are very stubborn and they didn't want to learn new things, but I would recommend it. It took me almost like 5-6 years to get my parents to switch to an iPhone. So hey, I would give it some time. I just always gently nudge them like, oh, look at this and look at that. And it's just something that they have to endure on their own, because it's not something that I can teach them. I can only teach them once they cross that bridge and once they make that decision, but I can't teach them to understand that the new thing might be good for them. So just wanted to come on here and talk about that because I had this thought like in the shower. So being patient is one of the greatest things you could do. I noticed that before I used to get so irritated and frustrated by my parents a lot, and it's because I just didn't have the patience, because I didn't live with them for a while and I was just very independent and on my own. So when I moved back onto their roof, it was a big adjustment. I learned so much through that chapter, and I'm very thankful that I got to experience that. As an oldest daughter, my parents still ask me to this day, like even before I filmed this episode, my dad came in asking for help, and I realized patience is a lifelong journey. It's a growing skill that you have to constantly learn every day, and you have to choose being patient. It's not just a natural reflex, and that's me. I noticed that I'm very impatient, so I try to be more patient and I try to choose to be patient. It's harder on some days and it's easier on others, but the point is to keep trying. Keep trying, being patient, and understand that they might not understand it in the first go, so you have to reiterate it multiple times. And that's just what it's like living with your parents and what it's like to be with your parents. And there's certain days that's really hard, but I'm just glad that I get to live with them again and we get to build these new memories. And it's a skill that I'm sure it will come in really handy later, because being patient is a skill. And I'm so glad that I have improved so much from before, because I was so impatient. But now I have more patience when it comes to my mom and dad, or just elders, or just in life in general. I'm able to wait patiently, and it's not the end of the world if I don't get it in my own time. So I was able to learn that through my parents. So I'm very grateful. Give yourself grace. And there were times where I would blame myself for not being patient, and I would basically like be mad at myself because I didn't like how I talked to my parents when I was impatient. I apologized because I noticed that I came off in a very, like, my tone was rude and I could sense it. So I apologized. That has been lessened over the years, and I'm very grateful because that means I'm improving. I'm going somewhere. So that's always a good sign. But I'm sorry, this was like all over the place, but the key here, the key point that I wanted to give you was to learn to be patient with your parents, because they deserve it. They were patient with us when we were younger, but to not be so hard on yourself, because being patient is a choice. And on certain days, it's going to be harder to be patient. That is the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.